I still don't know how to explain what happened to Jake. It's been weeks since that night, but the memory clings to me like damp air before a storm. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, just me and Jake, two old friends, hiking deep into Blackwood Forest. No cell service, no distractions, just the trees, the sky, and the crackling her campfire. Jake had always been the adventurous one. He was the guy who wanted to climb cliffs just to see what was on the other side. I was the guy who held the rope and made sure we didn't die. We balanced each other out. That Friday, we left early, driving 5 hours into the wilderness until the roads turned to dirt, then to something barely recognizable as a path. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sun was already low in the sky, bleeding through the pines like fire. "This is the spot," Jake had said, grinning as he tossed his pack over his shoulder. No tourists, no noise, just us and nature. I remember standing there, staring into the woods. There was something off about the place, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The trees were too tall, their branches gnarled and twisted. No wind, no rustling leaves, just silence. A heavy, waiting silence. We hiked in about 3 miles before setting up camp near a small clearing. The first night was uneventful. We drank cheap whiskey by the fire, told the same old stories, and listened to the distant calls of owls. I remember falling asleep easily, the embers glowing behind my eyelids. Then the second night happened. I woke up to Jake rustling around outside the tent. My watch read 2:47 a.m. "What the hell are you doing?" I muttered, sitting up. "Thought I heard something," he whispered. "Sounded like, I don't know, voices." "Voices." I frowned. "You sure it wasn't the wind?" But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. There was no wind, just that awful, suffocating silence. "I'm gonna check it out," Jake said, already zipping up the tent. "Dude, it's the middle of the night," I groaned, rubbing my eyes. "Probably just an animal." "Then I'll scare it off. Back in 5. And just like that, he was gone. I laid there, listening to the soft crunch of his boots fading into the trees. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Panic crawled up my spine. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows against the trees. I called Jake's name, but my voice felt swallowed up by the woods. No answer. I turned in circles, scanning the darkness. That's when I saw them. Footprints, Jake's, leading away from camp. But here's the thing, about 20 feet in, they just stopped. No signs of a struggle, no scuffle in the dirt, just a single set of footprints that ended abruptly, like he had been plucked straight from the ground. I must have searched for hours, screaming his name until my throat was raw. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I collapsed by the dying fire, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. When the sun came up, I packed our gear and hiked back to the car, convinced I was about to spend the rest of my life telling search and rescue teams that my best friend had just vanished. But that was before I got the text. It came through the second my phone regained service, making it buzz so hard I nearly dropped it. It was from Jake. "Help me. I don't know where I am." The timestamp said it was sent at 3:12 a.m., the same night he disappeared. And that's when I noticed something else. Attached to the message was a photo. A blurry, grainy image of trees, dark, looming trees. And standing between them was a figure. Not Jake, not anyone I'd ever seen before. It was tall, impossibly tall, and it was staring right at the camera. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen. The text, the photo, that thing in the trees. It didn't make sense. If Jake had service to send the message, why didn't he call? And where the hell was he? I tried calling back. straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. Something was very, very wrong. My gut told me to drive straight to the nearest ranger station to let professionals handle this. But then I thought about the footprints, how they had simply stopped, and that horrible, sick feeling returned. Jake was out there. He was alive, and he was waiting for me to find him. I turned the car around and drove back to the trailhead. The forest felt different in daylight. Not safer, just different. The silence was still there, pressing against my ears, but it was worse now because I knew what was missing. No birds, no insects, no signs of life, just me and the trees. I retraced our hike, following the same path we had taken 2 days before. My feet were steady, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every now and then, I checked my phone, hoping for another message, a pin drop, anything. Nothing. By the time I reached our campsite, the sun had started dipping behind the hills, painting the sky in bloody streaks of orange and red. I hadn't realized how long I'd been walking. Jake's footprints were still there, still ending in the same impossible place. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "Jake," I called out, my voice hoarse. "If you can hear me, man, say something." Silence. I stepped past the footprints, deeper into the woods. The further I went, the stranger it got. The trees seemed off, not just twisted, but wrong, like they weren't supposed to be here. I pushed on, forcing myself forward, until I saw something that made my stomach turn to ice. A new set of footprints. Not Jake's. They were bigger, wider, the kind of tracks that didn't belong to any animal I knew. And they were circling the spot where Jake's prints had ended. Something had been watching him. I was about to turn around. Hell, I was ready to run, when my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Another text from Jake. "It's watching me." I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. The forest was closing in, the trees stretching taller, darker. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps. Then the worst part. The attachment. I hesitated, then tapped it open. It was another photo. This time, it was closer, clearer. It showed a face. Or at least, something trying to be a face. The features were wrong. Too wide, too hollow, the skin stretched over the bone like wet paper. The eyes, if they were even eyes, were just pits of darkness. And there was something behind it. A shape, a figure, something standing over Jake's shoulder. The time stamp, 3:12 a.m. The exact same minute as the first text. I turned off my phone and ran. I ran. Branches tore at my arms, roots clawed at my boots, but I didn't stop. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and still, I ran. Jake was gone. I knew it in my bones. Whatever sent me that text, whatever took that picture, it wasn't him. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without knowing. Not without seeing it for myself. The forest seemed bigger now, stretching in ways that didn't make sense. No matter how far I ran, the trees only got taller, the sky only darker. And then I saw it. The clearing. It shouldn't have been there. I'd walked this trail twice. There was no clearing like this. The trees circled it like silent sentinels, their branches tangled together like grasping hands. And in the center of it all was Jake's backpack. Neatly placed, almost arranged. I approached slowly, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The air smelled wrong, like earth and rot, like something ancient had been disturbed. I reached for the pack with a trembling hand, unzipping it. His gear was inside, untouched. His flashlight, his water bottle, even the half-eaten granola bar he'd been snacking on the night before he vanished. Then I saw his phone, lying face up in the grass. The screen was cracked, but still on. and it had one unread message. From me. My own name stared back at me from the screen. I hesitated, then tapped it open. There was no text, just an image. The same figure from before, the thing with the stretched, empty face. But now it was closer. Too close. I turned the phone over, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I noticed something worse. Something impossible. The timer stamp. 3:12 a.m. Again, the exact moment Jake had sent the first message. The exact moment he disappeared. A branch snapped behind me. I whirled around, flashlight trembling in my grip. The clearing was still empty. The trees still watched. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from just beyond the tree line. And then, a voice. Help me. Jake's voice. It was wrong. Too flat, too hollow, like someone was wearing his voice like a mask. I backed away, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Jake, I croaked. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched between us. A terrible, waiting silence. Then, a shape stepped forward. I stopped breathing. It looked like Jake. Same build, same clothes, right down to the tear in his jacket sleeve. But his face, Jesus, his face. It was stretched, too smooth, the skin pulled too tightly over his skull. His eyes were empty. Not blank, not unfocused. Empty. Hollow pits of blackness, deeper than anything I'd ever seen. And then he smiled. Or at least, the thing pretending to be Jake smiled. It was wrong. Too wide. Too unnatural. My legs finally remembered how to move. I bolted. I don't know how I found my way back. The woods twisted around me, the trail shifting underfoot, but somehow I made it. I ran until my lungs gave out, until my body collapsed near the car, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the silence. The last thing I heard before I peeled out of that godforsaken place was a whisper. It was my name, spoken in Jake's voice, or rather the thing that used to be Jake. I never went back. Search and rescue never found a trace of him. No footprints, no clothes, just his abandoned gear. His phone was dead when they recovered it. They told me it was a case of misadventure. That Jake had probably gotten lost, maybe fallen into a ravine. But I knew the truth. I saw what took him. And sometimes, late at night, I still get messages. Always at 3:12 a.m. Always from Jake. And the last one just said, "Let me in."